So Sony finally did it. They released an RX0 Mark II. I thought this camera was dead. I thought it was dead last year. No one talked about it recently until the rumors of a vlogging version of it coming out made news. But Sony actually did. They brought it back from the grave. We're going to talk about it in this video. Stay tuned. If you don't know me already, I go by that one camera guy. I do tutorials, guides, and reviews on Sony mirrorless equipment and gear. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell notification so you don't miss out on the latest content, and smash that like button. It always helps out my channel. I would really appreciate it. Thanks. Okay, this is a podcast-like video. We're just talking about it. I don't have the actual copy of the camera. Didn't get a chance to test it out. It's more along the lines of me talking about what I've seen, the videos that have been posted about it, the specifications, and just sort of my thoughts on the Sony stuff in general. I'm a Sony shooter, I have a lot of Sony cameras, and just giving you my insight into that. So there's some good things and bad things about that. One, I don't feel pressure from a company sending me the product. And two, I have no strings attached to it. I can say whatever the heck I want about the camera and not really worry too much about it. So let's go ahead and start breaking it down and fill you in because, so again, this video is one of those types, just play it in the background, do your thing. Maybe you're working and maybe you're on a drive and you just want to listen to something. That's what this video is. It's perfect for that. I'm not going to show any visual aids for you. So just use your imagination or whatever you're doing. So here we go. We had an RX0 released in 2017. Cube-like camera. People weren't even sure what it was. It was either like a GoPro killer. It was an action cam, although Sony already had an action cam. It was like your RX100 Mark V inside of a small cube, but limited factors, limited abilities. But it could do slow motion. It could shoot 4K externally. It had an interesting potential, but no one knew what the hell it was for. And it seemed as if Sony was trying to give it purpose that it didn't really make sense for. Bullet time recording, having multiple sessions of it, multiple versions of it. People, and then doing that bullet time effect. People are trying to use it for vlogging, but when you're vlogging, you really do want to be able to frame yourself at least. Now, granted, it had a mic port, but then you didn't get things like a mic. You didn't have a way to easily mount it. Now, there was a cage so you could do it, but you didn't have autofocus continuous. You didn't have stabilization. It was lacking quite a few things. It just wasn't a complete tool. So who was it for? So the influencers got it, and then we were just like, they were trying their best to sell it to people, and no one, I could probably make nobody bought it. And the only time after they were probably done pushing it, it ended up inside cabinet drawers and it stayed there until the RX0 Mark II came out and they finally brought it out to compare it. But other than that, I've never seen them used generally at all. Not at all. If you did see them, let me know. I'm curious. And I've always been wondering if any of you out there have the camera and have used it. And has it been part of your setup? But now, with the addition of the screen flipping up, it now begins to have an identity. Like it actually has a direct purpose. Whether you agree with it being a vlogging camera or not, I know there's a large subset of people that just hate people that say they're vlogging cameras. But before, it didn't have a purpose. It didn't have a reason for it to exist. But now it does. So we're going to talk about the good, we're going to talk about the bad, and then we're going to talk more about sort of some weird thinking that I have or processes and insights of to what I think this thing is. And hopefully Sony is not making this sort of a common sort of scenario. So here we go. The good. Form factor. I like the size. It's just a cube shape. It kept it the same size roughly, got a little bit thicker. That's okay. That's perfectly fine. It was already sort of compact in its design. Very rugged build, shockproof, drop-proof, waterproof, you name it, crush-proof. It's going to handle some tossing into a bag, a luggage, dropping it on the floor, trying to set it up somewhere and you accidentally drop it. You're not having to worry about it completely anymore, which adds to its strengths, really. But granted, you're not going to, you can't really say it's crush-proof or drop-proof when you have the screen out. It doesn't affect it that way. It actually doesn't work anymore. So obviously the screen will break. So you want to avoid that. But when it's completely sealed back, you have those benefits. The flip-up screen, like I mentioned already, is the shining gem of this. And funny enough, we're starting to see a trend of the Sony cameras to have the flip-up screen. I mean, we saw this back in like The 5100, the A99 series had these things, or their alpha line, right? But now we're starting to see it pop up more. So I'm gonna do a little bet here. I think the A7S III is gonna have a flippy up screen. Somehow, some way, they're gonna make something on it. It seems to be the going trend. I'm sure a lot of people are gonna hate it, but the folks that are gonna love it, they're gonna be very happy with it. And I'm happy about the flip up screen that they implemented here. And what's interesting about it, because it's so small and it's conspicuous, it's not like if you're recording with your phone, the screen is fairly large, or with an RX100 or 6400, the screen size is a little bit big. People can kind of see what you're doing. But with this little tiny cube shape, what ends up happening is you could inconspicuously walk around. No one could care in the world. People might look at you like an idiot, but they don't really care. And you don't look like somebody that's doing pro work. You just look like an amateur. You just look like somebody walking around, just talking to a tiny camera. And the allure of that is very intriguing. Now, I don't vlog. It is not my thing. It is not the thing that I do. But having the option to do it would be very, very good. So, and I'll talk more about that. There's actually a point I'm going to make later on it. So, this inconspicuous camera, you're walking around town, you're walking around traveling, no one's going to think anything else of it. You're just doing your own thing. And I didn't write this in my notes, but it seems that the audio is not too bad internally. So you can get some decent audio in there, but it does have a mic port. So if you want to incorporate that, you can get better audio. You're going to have to find some way to rig it up. But they gave it to you so you could figure out a way to do that. I don't like the way they're implementing it, but you have the option to do it. So you also get 4K internal. I don't think it's going to be the best thing to use if you're just vlogging. 1080p is probably going to be more than enough, but you have it now if you wanted it. You have longer record times. People have been testing it out. It recorded until the battery died. So you get more than 30-minute recording. I saw people going 40 to 50-minute recording times. I did see some overheating situations, but it's better than before. Now, I want to point out, it's better than the RX100 Mark V, because the Mark V only lets you record up to 5 minutes of 4K. So you're getting even prolonged periods of 4K recording if you needed it in this camera. You get the picture profiles, all the S-Log, and all that good stuff if you want to use that. You get better autofocusing in the sense of that not dual pixel, but eye autofocus. So in the photos department, you have that ability now. It's a 1-inch sensor. So when you compare the 1-inch sensor, the action cameras are typically 1 2/3, I believe. So they're sizably smaller. So you're going to get technically better low light performance and better image quality out of this particular sensor of this camera, similar to the RX100 5A or 6 series. You get 15 megapixel stills. So if you want to use it as a photo camera, you can shoot RAW. And it's, you could probably use it 24 millimeters in equivalency, and you can shoot RAW. And if it might help you in a pinch, you get better images than maybe your phone. Granted, I think most people will probably use their phone. However, if you're finding yourself in really adverse conditions, this camera would be still a better choice to have over maybe using your phone. Anti-distortion at higher shutter speeds, so you don't have to worry about weird wavy lines or straight lines becoming wavy or moving objects. That's good. Integrates with the shooting grip. So this has been out for a while now. Obviously, you can't see it if you're just listening in, but it's a little tiny grip that you can hold. It has a photo button, has a zoom rocker, and has a movie button. And you can put it on your camera, plug it in via USB, and now you can do your pre-focusing. You can do your half-press focusing and lock your focus in, and then hit the movie record button to start recording. You can even set it up to have like a little mic set up on there. So it's a really great tool. Sony was very smart to bring it out, and it just keeps the overall payload very small. I remember when we were testing out the 6400, they let us borrow one of these to put the 6400 on, but the RX0 makes a lot of sense on something this small. So in terms of just form factor, this works out really great. It's already light, and then you're putting a small tiny camera on here. It makes it less conspicuous when you're using it. So good on Sony for finding ways to uniquely use this. Comes in handy. You have intervalometer, so you can do time lapses, and then they apparently have improved the color on this particular series. So quote unquote color, that it should be improved in this RX0 Mark II. So those are all the cool things about it, and the good that I personally saw. I might have missed some things, but those are some of the good things about the actual RX0 II. The bad. This is very, very strange. you have Sony, who has some of the best autofocusing technologies in their cameras, especially the A9, now the 6400, and even in like the RX10 series, the RX100 series, you have incredible autofocusing. Very, very good video autofocusing. But now, you don't get it in the RX0 Mark II. It wasn't in the first one, so can't complain. You don't get it in the second one. So what does this mean? Now, it's being touted as a vlogging tool, and you can definitely use it. So, so imagine that this is your RX0, for example. So now you're having to hold it up. You have to do a pre-focus and then hit the record button. Might not be a big deal. So if you're holding it out, do a pre-focus. It locks focus on your area where you're at, and then hit record. Now you can talk to the camera. It'd be okay. But what if you want to set the camera even further away from you? So for example, my 6300 is a bit further away. I can't just do the pre-focus and then just hit record. I'd have to use maybe my phone to do the pre-focusing from a little bit of a distance. So I can work around it. But if you wanted it to be quick to set up, I don't have face tracking. Why? There's no autofocus continuous, like just a basic face tracking. Whether they had it in 1080p and not 4K, we just don't have it at all, period. From a company, a camera manufacturer that pushes out really great autofocusing technologies, we don't have it in this. It's so strange. And my biggest fear, and on top of that, we don't have like, stabilization in the sense of like optical. I don't think there's anything like optical stabilization. We're getting like this electronic stabilization where you're gonna do it in software. So it looks good. I'm not saying they don't have decent stabilization. It's okay. It's workable. And even from the video that some people were showing already, it looked workable. It looked just fine. But I hope it's not something that Sony's doing, but I think they are, where they're creating a camera that's close to what you want with the anticipation that there's going to be another iterative model. This is just a stopgap before they make the better model in another couple years. So I don't like that. I really don't. And let me know if that's what you think it is. I'm just curious about it because it's similar to the 6400. And actually, I'll hold off on talking about that in just a second here. But just know, my mind is like, is this the RX0 Mark II stopgap? And then once we get to the RX0 Mark III, you're going to get autofocus continuous. You're going to get gyro. You're going to get some sort of crazy gimbal-like stabilization like you would saw on the GoPro Hero 7, I believe. Is that what we're waiting for? Are we going to see that in 2 years? Were they able to produce it now? And they just decided, you know what? We'll give them all of this. We'll hold off, save it for a couple of years, drop it in 2021, for example, and then they'll be back for the camera and then charge a higher premium for it, like $900 to $1,000. Now, from a business sense, it makes sense. To the consumer side of things, kind of sucks. You're not going to get all the things that you want. So that is just my assumption right now about it. It's another iterative camera. You're going to see an RX0 Mark III in 2021 probably, and finally it addresses some of those issues. So at that point, what will happen is all the influencers who got the cameras earlier, they'll get them out and they'll say, oh, thank God Sony has finally solved this problem. Because quite frankly, that's been the discussion. They say they solved the 4K problem, they solved this problem, they solved that problem, but then they say, what happened to the AFC? So there's still something missing, and I hope Sony is not doing this whole, we're going to pull back a few things and wait for the next generation to come out. So I do hope that isn't the case and that it was an issue that they just couldn't incorporate it into the camera. I'd love to know someone that might know why they did that, why it was just omitted. You're just a lack of video. But there's workarounds. You can make it work. I know that. You just have to change. You have to do the pre-focus and then hit record. So you just have to change the way you process the recording style to still work it out. Okay. Stabilization, when you do send it to your phone, you can send 4K video. However, if you use the movie add-on software, so there's a specialized software now that's also on your phone from Sony that will allow you to edit the footage but also stabilize it. Now, that they use the data, whether it's a gyro or something, it stabilizes it pretty good. There's some other features on it, But the weird thing is, if you send a 4K video, when you process it in the app, it only will output to full HD. So you'll lose the 4K if it's important to you. Now, everyone's been saying, well, the folks who've had it said they want to see a desktop version of the app, and I completely agree. They need to have a desktop version so that people can process it on their computers. Hopefully that is something that they can do. All right, another con, I guess, is the actual lens itself is f4. It's an f4 lens. Now, the RX100 Mark V at 24mm equivalent, at the widest end, is an f1.8. You're losing 2 1/3 stops of light gathering capability. And they have very similar sensors. So when it comes to low light, the RX100 is going to be a better camera tool. When you go with this one at f4, you're just not going to get the same kind of low light performance. Maybe, I don't know why they decided to go with the particular optics, but that's what they went with. An f4 lens. Could have been better with f2.8, but it doesn't appear to have been the case. So it probably has to do with that it had to be in that size for them to be able to put it on there. So that's just my assumption. Just know you're not, the low light stuff that some people have posted look decent in video, but just know you're not going to get the same performance that an RX100 would be able to pull off. $699 is the retail price. I'm pretty sure they're going to have a price drop. I don't think everyone's going to go out there and buy this thing. I mean, I will go out there and I will talk a little bit about why I don't think everyone's just going to go out and run out there and buy this particular camera. Just not going to happen. You're going to get some folks, but I don't think it's going to be the whole world, obviously. So price is kind of where Sony's going to be at, $699. And like I said, you're going to see RX0 Mark III, and that's probably going to be $899, $999 in 2 years. You can bank on that. All right. Battery life is questionable. I think straight recording, we were seeing 40, 50 minutes of 4K recording. But I think with intermittent use on and off, you're definitely probably are going to want to have additional batteries. It's that tiny battery, and you're just not going to get a lot of juice out of it. So good thing the batteries are small. They're not super expensive, although you probably might want to buy the genuine ones because they last longer from experience. So make sure you have plenty of extra batteries. Finally, I think Kai was talking about the rolling shutter. It seems to be a little bit of an issue in 4K. So if you're shooting in 4K and you move the pan a lot, you might see the rolling shutter. But I don't think it's going to be as bad as like APS-C cameras. So hopefully it's not too bad. So that's sort of the cons. And they're pretty big. I think they can kind of be a turnoff in some cases and kind of restrict maybe kind of how you want to use it. So some very strange thoughts here. Sony is definitely positioning this as sort of a vlogging tool. So we had the 6300 come out, and in a year, like not even a year later, we got the 6500. The 6500 had the in-body image stabilization, had good autofocusing. It would have been a very good vlogging tool, minus the fact that it didn't have a flippy screen. So without the flippy screen, you couldn't frame yourself, and you would need to use some other device to be able to record yourself. But it was pretty good. It was pretty good. You can at least admit that. Sony brings out the 6400. Now you get, in this case, you get good autofocus. You now get a flippy screen. It's geared towards vloggers to some extent, but they don't put the stabilization. Big question mark in the air about that. No stabilization. So you have autofocus continuous. You have a flippy screen. Things that you would need as a vlogger, but no stabilization. So, if you're hand holding it, it might not be as good if you had stabilization inside the camera. Now we get the RX0 Mark II. You get stabilization, you get a flippy screen, but we decide not to give you autofocus continuous, which is something a vlogger might need if they're filming themselves. Isn't that kind of strange? Now, I'm not saying that every vlogger films the same way. Everyone films very differently, but it just feels like a weird omission that you have an incomplete product. It's that issue of it's not all there. It's not the best tool. It's a good tool, but it's not 100% there. It's similar to the 6400, where my comment about it was that it would have been a much better tool, a much more full-fledged tool if it had the built-in stabilization, but they didn't. So they omitted it, and as you know, you're probably going to see it in a future generation. It was a feature held back for another model. All right. So some other things that I want to mention. This is not a first camera purchase. It just isn't. The system is very difficult to learn initially. you're not going out there and buying this as your main camera. This is a supplementary camera. It is for serious, I would consider it more for serious amateur enthusiasts. It's not a set it and forget it kind of camera. You actually need to know what in the world you're doing to get the most out of a $700 camera of this particular size. You don't just go ahead and buy it. So the ones getting it probably already own an A7 series or A6000 series camera, and they want to have another tool in their bag. That's what this is. It's another tool for them to be creative and create content. That's what I see it as. But it's definitely not a first camera. The menu system takes time to get used to. I've already made my spiel about that. But it's not an easy camera to learn initially. And like I said, no one's going to jump into it right away. So that's who I think is going to get it. Now, whether I'm going to get it is a different question. I did consider it. I said, I would like a small compact camera, inconspicuous. I can record high quality video, maybe some B-roll and not get weird looks. Maybe even talk to it here and there. But what became a turnoff for me was that lack of autofocus continuous when it would have made it a little bit easier for me. So that kind of was a little hitting point. Now, I've been thinking outside the box about how I could utilize it more. Maybe I can position it as a camera that records from a different angle. Maybe I'm recording a concert, and then maybe I can position it in a corner somewhere where it doesn't get in the way and gives me a different perspective. It could be leverage in those cases, and something about it is that you can technically control multiples of these. So if you own 5 of them, you can control it from your phone, it appears. So you can probably start the recording and stop the recording from a phone device and get different angles from that. Now, it's not something I would be actively doing, but I'm just trying to think out there, how else could we use it? But if you have any other creative thoughts about how you would leverage an RX0 Mark II, let me know in the comments. What's not obvious about it that you could use it for? Very curious to see. So kind of concluding sort of the overall thinking about this, who it's for. It's for serious amateur enthusiasts who want to vlog and have another tool and device that's a little more rugged. It's going to work well for travel, people. I can see that. You're definitely going to want something like this little grip to improve its user interface. But just like any camera you buy, do you really need it? You probably don't. If you already own an RX100, you're probably good enough already. I think the people who really want the RX0 Mark II know they need an RX0 Mark II because they're going to find themselves in those rugged scenarios. But I think I don't think it's the first camera that I would think in my mind. And if you're comparing between an RX100 and an RX0, if you're not a rugged kind of person, you're not in those scenarios too often, I think the RX100 is just an overall better camera, feature for feature. The RX0 is a little more specialized in my opinion, but that's just my thoughts on it. I don't know, but that's how I see it. Let me know in the comments down below. Is it something that you would pick up? But I'll probably do a loaner if I can from Pro Support and see if I can take a look at one later. But it's not the kind of camera that's going to make me want to, gravitate towards. But I do want to check it out. I am curious about it a little bit. But let me know in the comments down below. Are you going to get one? What did they miss? What's the price point that's right for you that would trigger you to buy this? Let me know. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out my other content. Catch you guys later. Peace.
I left my heart in California. I let it go deep into the blue. I could be